authors and events centered around the war between the states. C-SPAN 2, created by the cable industry, offered to you as a public service. This is the cover of The New Way Things Work. It's an update to David McCulley's original book explaining how things like gears and airplanes. This new book continues with more recent inventions such as bank cash machines and compact disc players. Selection next. Mr. McCulley discusses about creating this and his other books. He spoke at the bookstore in Washington, D.C.
Actually, I'm working.
Two. All right.
Well, we would like to welcome David McCulley back to the Cheshire Cat. The time you came, David, I think was for Unbuilding some time back, and when the first time The Way Things Work was published, David came and signed books for all of us and told us about the way he put it together, which was really fascinating. We were delighted that you've updated us because we don't know quite how computers work or microchips work or what have you, so we were thrilled that you had some help, some engineering help. So welcome back.
Thanks. It's nice to be back. It's nice to be... I got to get off this chair. I don't trust it.
Have a stool.
This is a structurally unsound chair.
That's a structurally unsound
chair. This is solid. Good old wood, you know? Real material. Yes, sir. That plastic stuff. I mean, stay away from it. Let me tell you a little bit about the new way things work. I think that's probably the best place to start, since that's the excuse we use here. We've added about 80 pages to the original book because has happened in the digital world since 1988 that we felt it was time to give the digital stuff its own section. And if you remember from the old edition, there were 4 sections. Now there are 5 sections. You just don't even realize how much is digitally controlled until you start to think about it. When I made the drawing of the supermarket system, for instance, and it's just sort of an overview of the supermarket system, but when you stand in the checkout counter of the supermarket and you swipe your card through the press credit and then you press yes, unless it's absolutely the wrong number, and in that sort of sweep of events, including the scanner, which is reading the price code off the item, I mean, basically talking with other stores, with the supply places, with their bank, which is talking with, and it's all within a matter of seconds, which permits you to leave that store with a carton of milk or whatever it is you have selected. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it is everywhere. So Neil Ardley and I, and Houghton Mifflin, everybody who was involved from the publishing side, but Neil and I were basically involved with putting the book together, part of the book together. Felt that it was time. Actually, we talked a few years ago about doing a book on, just doing a book on the computer, but I just couldn't get interested in it. So, and there, if you've been to have computer books, technology books, and stuff like that, you will know that there are already 700 books on the computer. So I felt the last thing we really needed was yet another. Plus, you know, I don't like the computer. I mean, I know I have to use it and all that sort of stuff, but I'm not a big fan. I have 2 pieces of equipment in the studio, sort of work areas, and they're back to back, so I could just swivel the chair. And on one side is the keyboard and the computer and stuff like that, and that's all I do on it. Maybe email, but I try to put that off. I try to protect email and just not switch it on. But then I'll turn this way, and there's a drawing board. So when I'm working on a book, whether it's work, but almost any of the other books, I go back and forth between the drawings and between the writing, because for me, when I'm trying to tell a story or give some information, I like to use both the words and I like to be able to go back and forth quickly so that in the end, when the book is finished, the book that hopefully seamlessly, I mean, I hope it does this, I hope ultimately a seamless combination of words and pictures, so that you don't know where the information is, or you don't even know where the story actually got to you, either in the pictures or in the words. And that can only happen, I think, if you work, I'll get that. That can only happen if you work on both things simultaneously. And I never understood, it's very difficult for me to understand how people can actually illustrate other people's stories. That's how I started, trying to illustrate other people's stories. But then the whole question of how much information you actually have with the story, or do you just treat it as a finished thing and try to make the best of it? I've had the best of all possible in this position of being able to write the story as well as create the pictures for the story. Me, who does the same kind of thing, is equally lucky, because we can adapt, we can adjust or modify either the pictures or the words depending on what the book needs at that moment, at any given moment through the sequence. So anyway, how did I get off on this? I was in the supermarket. I remember I was in the supermarket. I was scanning my card. The computer books, right? We decided not to do that. So work is filled with things that I cannot remember. So that's one of the reasons I did the book, was so that if I had a question about some piece of technology, I would know where to look it up. I have to tell you, the process is very simple. It's a simple process, even though the bits of it are often fairly. Working with Neil Ardley, who's a technical writer, and he's really the guy who knows all the stuff in the book. And people assume it would be just because my name is on the front, but that's another question altogether. My job is to learn things in the book, to learn it as thoroughly as possible, so that I can then translate it into pictures. I often will draw the thing I'm trying to understand in order to understand it better. So what I have in the end are sketches and drawings that actually have taught me what this machine does, or what this system is, or whatever. I then obviously the most pertinent of those pictures, the best, the most effective, the clearest perhaps, maybe just the most interesting, and they become the pictures that I give back in the book to help someone else understand it. And then I promptly forget the information. Once I have made the drawing, I immediately, I have an erase little garbage can, empty trash mechanism. The computer does. And at the end of every day, I just press that little button and the garbage can gets very small again, and all that information is gone. And then 6 years later, I'll be talking to a group like this, and somebody will ask me about their beta tape player. Or they'll start a sentence with, we've got a 1,000 megahertz system here, and we're 1,000, and then I'm lost trying to sort of analyze the question in little pieces. So whenever I have questions about technology, I go to The Way Things Work, because we have a really good index. We have a good index, because it allows me to sort of go back and pull out that information. My job was translator, not memorizer, and certainly not expert in technology. I'm more an expert in technology than I am an expert in building cathedrals or building Roman cities. I just get interested in things. And I think what I am basically is a student who just won't quit. But I have to be able to choose the things I learn about. You can't make me learn about stuff that I don't want to learn about. But if I get excited about something, I will learn everything I can about it, regurgitate it in some sort of visual form, publish a book, and go on to learn the next thing, which means, obviously, forgetting some of what came before. So what I guess I'm basically telling you is, if you have any technical questions for me, keep them to yourself. Because I'm not going to answer any technical questions today. We do have Neil's number. We can call him. He's not going to be in bed. He lives in England. He'll still be up for a while, so we can get him on the line. It's actually easier for me to talk about almost any of the other books, in fact, all of the other books, because it's just me. This was The Way Things Work, clearly, just its weight, never mind the amount of information in it, project. And it was a group project from the very beginning. So that's why I feel a little bit alone up here when I'm confronted by The Way Things Work, because I am part of the group that put it together. So what's coming next, you ask? I heard somebody ask. It may amaze you, maybe not, but it amazed me when I realized that Cathedral was 25 years old this year. And only when I stand next to my 4-year-old daughter, Liz, do I realize that it is, in fact, possible that Cathedral could be 25 years old. Anyway, we began talking, Walter Loraine at Houghton and I began talking about an anniversary edition of Cathedral. Now, anniversary editions have a tendency to be bigger and glossier than the original, but ultimately the same thing. You just try and sell the same thing again, which didn't seem entirely fair. So what we've decided to do is create an edition of the book which will tell the story of Cathedral again, but will also tell the story of the making of Cathedral simultaneously. So it'll be filled with, not filled with, but it will have a selection of sketches and drawings and notes, spelling, which will amuse countless readers, who will empathize immediately with the copy editors, who tried to translate not only my fake French words, which I invented to sound like French places, but my actual English words, which look sort of like the French words I invented to, you know how that goes. So the book will actually begin with the stuff that preceded Cathedral, the story that never got published, that became Cathedral, and then we will sort of go into the story, and I will, from time to time, pull out one of the finished pieces of art in the book and replace it with the last sketch for that particular drawing, or even an earlier sketch, so that while you will still be able to read Cathedral all the way through from beginning to end and hopefully enjoy that particular construction process, you will simultaneously be able to read and be reminded of, at the same time, how a book is made, how a book is built. They're both trial and error processes, so obviously it's a little more dramatic when your buttress falls down, because your trial and error wasn't so terrific. It's a little less dangerous and catastrophic if I have to tear up a page and see it again. But Cathedral was the first book, so it's sort of an interesting nostalgia trip for me to go back and look at all that stuff and try to sort of reconstruct the history to the best of my ability. But anyway, that's the plan. That's what's happening. That's what will be happening through the month of December. Yeah.
You talked about down sometimes, and I remember having been given a book by I think he's an architect who wrote a book called Why Buildings Fall Down. And I'm just wondering if I think it's an adult book. I mean, I don't think it's a kid's book, but it suffers, I think, because it doesn't have the sort of illustrations that you are so well known for.
Or if I'm thinking about the
there's
same book.
a Ken Follett novel about a cathedral building, which you probably
There's Pillars of the Earth, yeah.
or read, and that's a very, I mean, in a way, it's nice to read his book with your book,
Yeah.
sort of side by side. Would it be to people why things do fall down and
Oh,
why
sure.
things don't work, as
Sure.
opposed to why things do work?
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I Know Why Buildings Stand Up by Mario Salvadori, which is illustrated with diagrams and so on. And Salvadori doesn't use drawings a lot. I mean, sure, he had either a freelance illustrator or students or somebody make the drawings for it. And they're competent diagrams, and they do the job. But when Salvadori teaches, what he does, he teaches with models. And he teaches with you know, the actual thing collapses in front of you or stretches or whatever happens. The notion of bringing that into book form, of trying to get people interested in something and then teach them about it once you've got them interested, is something that I think requires either or some pretty dramatic illustrations that are engaging initially, but then informative immediately after. You have to make those two things happen at the same time. But yeah, no, I think there's probably as much interest in why things don't work as how they do. The book was done as a spoof of the way things work, the way things are supposed to work or something like that, was a disappointment to me because I thought, what a great idea this is. And it sort of got, the people really felt that in order for their book to sell, they needed to get it out really quickly while people were still looking at the way things work. And therefore I didn't get the attention. You know, they killed the trees, but it didn't get the attention in the end to make the material as good as it could be. But they chose pretty interesting things like what happens to your luggage at the airport and stuff like that. You know, that's an example that's actually in the book, and we would all love to know. Stephanie McLaughlin of Houghton Mifflin would particularly love to know what U.S. Air did with her bag in White Plains, New York. And we are still waiting for it to arrive in Philadelphia. But anyway, it's a great idea. It doesn't matter. If If you can encourage people's curiosity, it doesn't matter which way you go, either building up or tearing down. The important thing is to recognize that the curiosity is probably, it's not, you're going to need to tap into it. You're going to need to engage it somehow. And that's the thing that picture books, storybooks seem to have a better shot at doing. The new project we're doing after, the new project I will be working on after Cathedral is a project called Building Big, and it's a 5-part show for GBH on engineering. And the first will be bridges, and then tunnels and dams and domes and skyscrapers. Those are the 5. My job is to not only to host it, which is an easy job because I just get to be on camera and eat in restaurants around the world. So that's not so bad. The hard part of the job is I also have to produce the book that will accompany the show. Now, it used to be days of Alistair Cook's America and Kenneth Clark's Civilization that there was no way we mortals were going to see those videos for a long time. So the book came out, and that was all you could get. And it was the script, and in both cases, scripts written by really good writers, good historians and so on, good storytellers. But now, the airing of the first show will end with, for your copy of Building Big, $12,000 to WGBH, and they will send you the videotape. So there is no point in making a book that mimics or records what's in the videotapes. It's a medium now that can be used in conjunction with books and should be seen as an opportunity to say other kinds of things, to give other kinds of information, to speak to David McCullough, to speak to John Van Der Zee about the Golden Gate Bridge and so on. Actually listen to these historians and with amazing knowledge about the structures that they have worked on or written about and so on. To speak to an engineer about why that bridge goes so much when the subway train goes over it and what happens if it doesn't. My job, and I haven't figured out what that job is exactly or how to satisfy it, will be to produce that stands on its own, but that, as I say, does not duplicate or attempt to duplicate what's in the video. In a sense, what the CD-ROM could do that I couldn't do in the original way things work. I mean, you could now see machines animated rather than see a kind of a stylized version of motion in 5 little. I mean, it's a simple thing, but boy, once you see something animated and you can do it over and over again, and there's the wonderful addition, an incredibly important addition of sound, suddenly some of this stuff comes, if it's drawn in a sort of lighthearted way, the information really comes to life, and I think it stays with you in a way that images don't always, especially static images become more technical. So that's what I'm working on. You're up to date, 1,000. Now let me take some questions. Go ahead.
How did you get the idea of putting the mammoths in the way things work?
The mammoths they sort of into the book, and I was not paying attention. I was drawing the early mechanical machines like levers and pulleys, planes and all that sort of stuff. I was drawing that, and I had a bunch of cave people standing on a rock and a log, and they were going to learn how to make a lever. And then they played on it like a seesaw, and then for some reason I thought to myself, well, why don't I weigh the mammoth? So I drew the mammoth, which was standing in the background, just quickly scribbled in the background of this little drawing. I drew him on the log, and then I the village on the other end of the log to get that log level so we could know how much the mammoth weighs. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, if I can do that with the mammoth here, maybe I can use the mammoth to help explain the inclined plane. And if you remember, the earliest example of the way they used, well, first, let me back up a little bit. You know that mammoths were used for, in old, really old times, mammoths were used as, in some cases, as household pets, but they were used for chores, deliveries, and things of that nature. But they needed some training. And to train them, you had to capture them and so on and so forth. So the way they were apparently caught initially was the cave people would construct wooden towers, and they would have to get a rock, pretty big rock, hoist it up to the top of the tower, and they would have to put mammoth, usually swamp grass. That's what they really. They have to put that near the base of the tower. The mammoth would wander over because they basically like to eat. more than anything, delivering more than being around the house. And then the guys would push the rock off the tower. It would stun the mammoth. You don't want to hurt it too much. And while it was, drag it back to some kind of training place and, you know, so on. The problem is that lifting those rocks to the heights of the towers was really, it was almost impossible. Plus, if the mammoth was stunned, if you did get the rock up there and dropped it off and the mammoth was stunned, it would fall into the tower and everybody would just come collapsing on top of the mammoth. So not a good system. Now, I'm telling you this story because this is exactly what was going through my head. I had to try and think of a way of explaining the ramp, which is the inclined plane of the first simple machine. If you could just roll that rock up to a certain height and have the mammoth lean against the bottom of the ramp and drop the rock off, you'd stun the mammoth, nothing would happen to the ramp. And so this is the way in which ideas sometimes develop for these things. The mammoth who is there really quite by accident in the very first little sketch of the lever, which comes after the inclined plane, just obviously stayed for the whole book. And I had no idea that it would. We weren't sitting around the table in London thinking, what kind of a prehistoric animal, or not prehistoric, but what kind of maybe they are, what kind of a really old beast could we have to serve as our mascot? So that never occurred to us. It's just, it crept in, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why it worked. And it's probably why until, you know, recently there aren't any stuffed mammoths out there, at least that we've produced. There may be stuffed mammoths, but we haven't made any yet. That will change next year. Yeah.
Your drawing on cathedral, isn't this a drawing of an unfinished cathedral that's still under construction?
This one?
Yeah.
No. This one is a drawing of, let me hold it. This is a drawing done for this book, but the initial showed to the people at Houghton Mifflin was approximately this. And there was scaffolding hanging off the top and so on, and it was part of another story. I wasn't trying to tell the story of the building of the cathedral, I was trying to tell a story about gargoyles. So if you're here a year from now, I'll be able to show you the unfinished cathedral drawing, which looks very similar to this, but is not. Different drawing.
And if so, why did you decide to make this window empty and this window have sculptures?
No, they're not sculptures, they're louvers, and it's got bells in it. That's the bell tower. But we only needed one tower for bells. So that's usually what happened.
Showed on the outside, and I've always learned that Gothic cathedrals are symmetrical.
They are symmetrical for the most part, but, well, they're symmetrical, but they're not absolutely symmetrical. There are some, like Notre Dame in Paris is symmetrical, but the cathedral in Amiens, on which I base mine, is not absolutely. The towers are different. In Chartres, the towers are different. Lomme, the towers are symmetrical, I think. One of the reasons why they were, you know, in an ideal world, they probably would have been absolutely the same. But what happened is they ran out of money. And they kept running out of money, so styles would change a little bit. And in Amiens, styles changed significantly, so the towers even look different. They look like they're from sort of different ages. But if you're out of money for 100 years, that's what happens. Cindy.
What's your favorite book, and what was your toughest book?
The toughest book was The Way Things Work. Being drafted would have been more fun than working on that book. 400 pages of machines over 4 years. I mean, just think about it, you know. I was ready to get any kind of a job halfway through that book. In fact, halfway through the book, I said to the editors, I said, can't we just make this book half as long as we had originally? This is plenty of machines. They don't want to know about that other stuff. Let's just stop here, because I can't stand it. But I stuck with it, and I'm glad we did stick with it, because it's been reasonably successful. Definitely the hardest, because another reason why it was the hardest is it wasn't for me. It wasn't my idea to do a book on machines. I didn't mention that. I was talked into it. I was actually kidnapped, and they would not felt like it by halfway through the project. No, I was talked into it by some English friends, and I said, okay, I'll just be part of it. Let me just consult or something, process. And the more I worked on it, the more I got sucked into this thing. And the more it became mine. And the more it became a visual thing rather than a more sort of straightforward technical book on. My favorite book is Romantics. It still took a lot longer to do Romantics than it should have, because it's, in the end, a fairly straightforward, simple story, and only 80 pages. But it took me 3 years to do this book. One of the reasons being that I love Rome. And I learned about Rome as a student. I lived there for a year as a student. I spent my 5th year of Rhode Island School architecture program in Rome. And it was really the first year of life, in many ways. As wonderful as my education in Providence was, Rome was just like, unlike anything I knew, unlike anything I'd ever seen, and any place I'd ever been. So when, you know, 25 years later, or whatever it is, I wanted to do a book about the city, I was so overwhelmed by responsibility, I think, and sort of, it had to be the right book. And I overthought it. You know, I just went around in circles trying to decide what kind of book I should make about Rome. And in the end, I created a love story. So, a dual love story, which also has, you know, it's not, there are all kinds of subplots, romantics that are not in the book, but they are certainly in the motive for doing the book, and Rome is just one of them. So, that's my favorite, definitely. It's the book that feels most like me, if that sentence makes any sense. But anyway.
What inspired you to write this book here? You write lots of books about buildings and
Motel of the Mysteries? Motel of the Mysteries is a book about, for those of you who may or may not know, it is a book about archaeology that's gone terribly wrong. We take for granted what we read in textbooks. We take what the experts tell us. We believe that if the expert says it, it must be true. Well, archaeology, if you look through archaeology books, there are an awful lot of objects that they call ceremonial objects. It's hard for me to believe that there were really that many ceremonies in the old days, but apparently there were, because there are all these ceremonial objects. I decided at our country, or some aspect of this country in the future, and try to guess what the archaeologists would make of it. So, Motel of the Mysteries was done as a joke. It was done entirely for fun. I had done the 5 architecture books, and I'd done Great Moments. I just couldn't go back to the architecture books. I wasn't ready to go back to those. I wanted to have fun. So I started, every time I went lecturing or whatever, I would stay in a hotel or motel or something like that, and I would start to notice things like the paper bands around the toilet seats and those stainless steel hoops on the wall that you wedge your towels into. These are only the finest hotels I'm talking about now. So I thought, you know, let's just cover it with dirt and dig it out and present it in a way that looks serious, that looks like it was done by the pros, but when you start to read it and look at the things that are really being talked about, you already have the knowledge to know what they actually are. The work of some expert in the future completely misunderstanding the toilet plunger, for instance, and things of that nature, the toilet seat. Heavy on the toilet stuff in that book. But, you know, somebody had to do it. Anyway, that was really fun. And the reason I didn't want to go back to the architecture books was cathedral and city and pyramid and castle were really a formula. They had become a formula. I had not realized that when I did cathedral, obviously. I didn't even realize it when I did city. By pyramid, I was beginning to catch on that this was getting a little bit repetitive. But I wanted to go to Egypt. And it was a great excuse. So I went to Egypt and had to do the book after. Castle was another difficult book to do, not because the information was, because I really couldn't stand plugging stuff into the same formula. That's why after Castle there wasn't another book exactly like the first batch. I mean, Unbuilding goes off in a slightly different direction and tries to weave some humor into it and so on, but I couldn't do another straight one of those guys. Anybody else? Yeah.
How did you get your start in the book industry, or what was your first project like, and how did you segue into that from school?
Well, now I graduated from the School of Architecture with a degree in architecture, which meant that I was supposed to become an architect, but I had no interest. By the 4th year, I had no interest in becoming an architect, for a variety of reasons. So I needed to think fast, come up with something else. So I taught junior high school art for a year. a position that just fell into my hands. I barely survived that, but I did get through it. And I have enormous admiration for any junior high school, anything these days, never mind art. And I started doing freelance work. I did and ads for newspapers and things of that nature. And then I started asking friends to write stories because I didn't think I could. And then I would illustrate them, and a couple of them we actually took up to various publishers. I mean, called them up on the phone, said, I've got an idea, something I'd like to show you. First of all, you asked for the children's book department. And it was really, in 1972, I graduated in 1969. In 1972, the evolved out of a gargoyle story, and that was it. I've never looked back. One of the things for which I will be extremely grateful is not a lot of time was wasted in those early, what for many people is a long, drawn-out period before they finally click with something. I was very lucky. I stumbled on something because it was pointed out to me by my friend Houghton. Looked at the drawing and said, this is the wrong direction, but this part of the drawing, it looks really interesting. Why don't you tell us about this? Forget the gargoyles and tell us about the cathedral. They were both in the same picture, basically. And what they knew and what I didn't is that Where the Wild Things Are had already been done. It had been done very well. There was really no reason to do it again. Even if you said it in the Middle Ages, there was no reason to do it again. So, but I didn't know that. I thought it was going to be a wonderful story about gargoyles, but it would have been a poor man's Where the Wild Things Are, so kind of pointless. So I'm ever thankful that I got steered towards the stone blocks and buttresses of the cathedral. Yeah, anybody else? Go ahead. You've got one more question.
Well,
you can't wait.
Black and white. You seem to use a lot of black and white and shadowing, cross-hatching.
In Motel?
In all your books.
Yeah.
You use lots of.
It's just, I like working with pen and ink. You know, it's really that simple. I like working with pen and ink. And for that kind of stuff, for architecture, I didn't need the color. I needed the detail. But I felt that the things could actually be more dramatic if I didn't worry about color and stuff like that. Plus, at the time, I was terrified of color. So it took a long time to come around to making color books. I mean, probably 10 years or so before I did the first book in color. And the first one was pretty crude. It worked all right, but it was pretty crude. Not until we get to Why the Chicken Crossed the Road and Shortcut can I say I feel comfortable with the color. But it was great to get back to Romantics because it was another black and white book. And I'm just happy with black and white. I like black and white. Let's hear it for black and white.
Yeah.
I think they're out of questions.
There are other questions. David, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Now I think I have to go to work, right?
Yeah, I think you have to go back to work and
Coming up, reporting the
That looks good.
It's just a little joking.
That's wonderful. This is Anna's sister and brother-in-law. This is Anna's sister. This is right.
And the message is in here too. Well, it's a...
I just have to name it for whatever message.
Okay.
I'm just going to make a little one for them, not like yours.
Well, they're in Arizona, otherwise they wouldn't. But I talked to her right before I came.
Big fans.
Oh, yes. Wow.
Pretty fast, huh?
It's the best.
Anna's dad.
That's a Christmas
You're all
gift.
together?
Yeah. Mine, I just want to say.
Okay, just a signature and the date?
Right. This is Anna's grandma.
Oh, got the whole family here.
Everybody. We're darling. Well, he can do your book. I have two.
What is it?
Wow.
Press lightly because it imprints right on the cover.
Thank you so much.
To sign?
Yeah, these are just the sign and the date.
Is that right?
I have this one. Sorry.
Oh, are you sure?
Isn't that
I hope you remember me, but I'm one of the original Cheshire Cats also.
you are?
Way, way back. Charlotte girl.
Back in 88?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Back in 77.
77, is that when? When was I first here? Do you remember?
Oh, my God. Early
88, it was long before that.
on here. Oh, yeah.
No, he was never a doctor. He's got that.
Well, if I have to do another way things work, I think I might change it. So I'll take your advice on that.
We enjoyed the talk.
Thanks.
All the back was fascinating.
Thanks for coming. My pleasure. 2.
Just sign it. I'm
Just sign
giving
it?
it to my son-in-law.
Jody, your son is on line 2. Oh, line 2.
It says,
Are you guys all set?
Yeah. This one's for my sister.
Okay, so
When you look
this
just like
one?
you looked however many years ago. Exactly.
Well,
And
thanks.
where'd you get that sunburn?
It's just working up a little sweat here. No sunburn.
Okay.
It's a suit. I'm not used to wearing a suit.
I'm just going to stick it on the outside there.
Very elegant.
Here we go.
Thank you very much.
So that's
Nice to
Al?
see you
Good
again.
luck.
Yeah, Al Kilborn.
Okay.
They put Kilborn. This is my teacher.
Pardon?
He's my teacher.
So what should I say?
Al Kilborn.
Al Kilborn. I can do that. Not Mr. Al Kilborn, just Al Kilborn.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Like what?
Yeah,
The
I'm not
spelling?
sure if there's a U right there.
Yeah, I know it's not. It's not. No, it's not.
I think there is. Just write sloppy.
Yeah.
Okay. B
Good question.
O
And
You.
U.
No.
No.
No, you. It's you. It's you.
Okay. No, you can't really tell. It's illegible. But I have a way around that, so I think it'll work out okay.
Like hieroglyphics, because we're studying the pyramids.
It's here. If you don't need it, just leave it right where it is, okay? So it's just in case. I don't know. I don't know how else to solve the problem, but I think that will work out.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Oh, this is for Amelia?
Yes.
Is there a U in this?
Did you say you're studying pyramids right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Egypt. Oh, that's great. Look for it. Gothic?
Gothic? Does that say Gothic? It's really cute. There is zero, I know there is.
Don't let this drawing influence your research, okay? It's a little bit weird. Amelia, you're all set.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Is that your picture? I don't even know.
I think we'll get a kick out of this.
Any other questions? Did I answer all your questions today, or any questions that you had crossed your minds? This is a perfect opportunity.
So when I was in 5th grade, my teacher had a book signed by you, and I was convinced that I had met you.
You were convinced?
Yes.
Because that book, already because you'd seen my signature.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look any better now than it did then, probably. In fact, it looks worse. Less legible. Well, I still practice it, though. I'm still trying to do a good job on my signature, but it's not going to happen.
Thank you.
Better?
Just one more.
I saw you working on that. Very slowly, painstakingly. No school today?
We're out of school.
Oh, what a good deal.
We get out at like 3:10.
Yeah.
Do you go to school around here?
Yeah, we go to
Right.
Murray.
Boy, I'm really starting to get this down.
You're gonna be drawing in your sleep.
Did you enjoy going to the different places to research?
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful.
Which one did you like better, Rome or Egypt?
I love Rome. I love Rome. Yeah, Egypt is hard work. I mean, Rome is hard work too, but Egypt is really hard work because it's just so different from anything that I was used to, anything I was familiar with. Rome is not so different, except that you've got 2,000 years of history there. I mean, in Egypt, you've got 4,000 years of history or more. But they're wonderful. They're wonderful experiences. And, you know, if you get a chance to travel to those kinds of places, just, yeah, did you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you like it, or did you find it noisy or dirty? Or?
I like it a lot. It was the city I could see myself living in.
Yeah. You like Italian food, obviously. And
Yeah.
that's a key element right there. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. Any kind of food. Thanks for coming. See ya. Hi.
How are you?
Good.
This is for my godson Tyler.
Great.
How old is Tyler?
Getting ready to turn 13. Great builder of all things.
Oh, really? He's one of those kind, huh?
One of those sorts.
All right. That's good.
Even won the soapbox derby in his town. in
Did he really?
Massachusetts last year.
Oh, wow.
Where in Massachusetts?
So he's been in Andover.
Andover. That's where I send my taxes.
Because it's natural for him.
Oh, that's great. Soapbox Derby champ. That's no small feat.
Exactly.
If I had any idea what they look like, I'd draw one, but I'd get
I
lost.
won't ask you to tell how it works. Thanks.
I've gotten this sign before, it turns out.
Yes, you certainly did.
10 years ago.
You bet I can.
So cool.
It's funny, Nathan. I was going to ask exactly the same question.
They're fun to draw.
They look fun to draw.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you another question.
Yes.
The books that you've published up to now have all been about big, public, symbolic, awe-inspiring technology systems that involve a lot of people working together.
Thank you.
What's the thing that, but they're all sort of in the past. I mean, they're historic
Right.
artifacts of those things.
Right.
What, looking back on this era from the future, what would the thing be now that would be the functional equivalent of a cathedral or a pyramid that takes that kind of place in this society? And could you think about drawing those things or making a presentation of that idea today?
Well, the obvious answer is that we're going to be doing that with the Building Big series, with bridges like the Golden Gate and the new bridge in Japan. I don't even remember the whole name, but it's longer even than the Golden Gate and Verrazano and so on. There are works of engineering. You know, the Sky Dome, I guess it is, in Toronto that actually opens, a ceiling that actually opens to the sun in on the baseball field.
So that's kind of interesting to speculate then that the public function is about sports rather than about religion.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Maybe, in fact,
I think that's probably true.
the thing.
Yeah, if you think about comparable big things, yeah. They're either engineering things for a very practical purpose, or they're entertainment purposes. Going back to the Colosseum in that sense, building a roof over the Colosseum.
Right.
Yeah. Tell me something. Is this for you? Is this your book? Or is this for, am I just signing this?
That's for my sister.
Your sister. You want her name in it?
Yeah.
What's her name? Who?
Emilia was spelled with an E instead of an S.
Spell it for me. Spell it out. Write it on there. E. Yeah, all right. I. Oh, that's I-L-I? Okay, Emilia, got it. All right. What a good brother to be picking this up for his sister. Sheesh. Okay, she's all set. Now, is this yours?
Yeah.
And what's your name?
Colin.
Colin?
Yeah.
C-O-L-I-N? I love those short names. You got little stickers all over it, nothing on them. You can use these next time.
I don't think so. Well, we'll talk about it. I'm not quite clear that they would be that only through a quirk of fate. I was looking to continue, but maybe...
Colin, you are all set. Happy reading.
We'll discuss
Are we still having a good time?
Well, I think I would feel a little slighted. Do you want names?
I think Eli, E-L-I,
Okay.
and Simon.
So now my writing's going to be so much you're not going to be able to read it. And I'm sorry, that was...
Now, for Anna, Eli, and Simon.
Please. boys will wait for school. That's so nice.
It's official. For Anna, Eli, and Simon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Hi there. For Henry. Hello, Henry. France. Were you there? Did you go to the games?
No,
Last Christmas. Did you watch the games on television? Are you a soccer player?
we didn't see them.
Oh.
He is a soccer player?
I watched that last. Did you? Oh. Do you like to play soccer? Me too.